Marriage, the representation of conjugal love by most beautiful things. Love truly conjugal is represented in heaven by various things. It is represented by adamantine auras, sparkling as if from rubies and carbuncles, also by most beautiful rainbows and golden rains, which, when they are beheld, fill the bystanders with such pleasurableness and such delights that they affect the inmosts of the mind. I have heard the angels, when conjugal love was so represented in the paradises of heaven, say that they were filled with such delight that they could not express it otherwise than that it was delight itself, from which, as from their origin, all the rest of delights arise. And this delight was said to be a pure delight of the mind, without any excitation of lust, for such is conjugal love in its origin. Since truly conjugal love is in its origin pure delight itself of the mind, and that love is the fundamental of all loves, and from love is all the beauty of the angels in heaven, for love or the affection of love forms every one, wherefore every angel is as to his face the image of his love or affection. Hence it is that all the beauty of angels in heaven is from their conjugal love, for the inmost of their life which shines through is thence. An angel was seen by me, who was in pure conjugal love. He was from the third heaven. Such was his beauty that the bystanders were carried away with admiration, saying that it was beauty itself in its essence. That love truly conjugal is such beauty, and also such delight, is from its first origin, which is the union of the divine love of the Lord with his divine wisdom, then the marriage of the Lord with heaven, and with the church, and thence with every one the marriage of good and truth, concerning which origins of love truly conjugal it shall be spoken in their places. In love truly conjugal there is nothing whatever of lasciviousness. Those who do not know what love truly conjugal is, and who are not in it, may think that it is not given without lasciviousness. But yet the difference is such as is between heaven and hell, for their delight appears in externals as if the same, but every external derives its quality and its essential nature from internals. The internal of conjugal love is from the Lord, and thence from heaven, and from everything auspicious and happy there. But the internal of lasciviousness, or of adultery, is from the devil, thus from hell, and from everything inauspicious and unhappy. Every external derives its essence from internals. Therefore neither are the external of conjugal love and the external of adultery alike. The external of conjugal love is filled with all the delights of heaven, and the enjoyment of heaven which is in that love expels all the enjoyment of hell. Hence, those two enjoyments in external form are, because of their internals, altogether dissimilar. The angels also clearly perceive from the sphere of the love of two consorts whether what is lasciviousness is in it, and its quality and quantity, and so far remove themselves from them. The reason that the angels so far remove themselves is, that the lasciviousness of adultery communicates with the hells, but the chastity of marriage with heaven. Love truly conjugal is chastity itself. Celibacy is not called chastity in the heavens, nor is a girl called chaste, neither is an unmarried woman, nor a virgin, but a wife who turns away from adultery is called chaste. Likewise, a husband who turns away from it, because love truly conjugal is what is called in heaven chastity. Conjugal love is innocence itself. Consorts who are in conjugal love appear in heaven like the innocent. Conjugal love is love to the Lord. All who are in love truly conjugal are in love to the Lord, because it descends from the marriage of the Lord with the church. Hence it is that they who are in the third heaven, who are all in love to the Lord, are in love truly conjugal. Love truly conjugal cannot be given except by the Lord. Two consorts in heaven make one angel. There is between two consorts in heaven a similar conjunction, as there is in every man, between the will and the understanding, or between the good, which is of the will, and the truth, which is of the understanding, because the female by nature is affection, which is of the will, and the male is by nature thought, which is of the understanding. More concerning these in the work on heaven and hell. Those who have for an end in marriages lasciviousness, such as is of adultery. There appeared to me, as if in a kitchen, wherein was a dark fireplace, without fire on the hearth, women with knives in their hands, which they as it were wished to slay infants. They were crafty, cunning, and malicious, all harlots, secretly alluring men to themselves from every quarter. These being inspected by the angels appeared like intestines in pairs of balls, one of which was filthily bloody, the other foully yellow. Thus were represented their lusts, when they were inspected by angels. All were such women as seek matrimony solely for the sake of adultery with others, because then they do not fear scandal, on account of illegitimate offspring, which they attribute to the husband. Their lot is most cruel. All things there are filthy. They dwell in caves, and on account of their ugliness and deformity they fear to be seen, nor can they longer allure any adulterer, because they are deformed and have a foul smell. Men also, with whom adulteries are the end of matrimony, and afterwards have lived with adulteresses, acquire such a nausea for a wife that they fly from them. They become at length impotences, and with them the life of thought and speech perishes in the society of wives, and especially in the society of their own wives. Mice. Lascivious wives, and also unmarried women who make light of whoredoms, dwell in two kinds of places, some in the western region in front, and some behind. All that are there knew how to insinuate themselves with men by simulated affections, by which they acquired the lascivious love of some male, caring nothing whether they were good affections or whether evil affections. Those who dwell in front were crafty and cunning, and of such a genius that they could perceive of what nature, disposition, inclination, and cupidity were the men whom they wished to allure, especially in depriving a man of his wealth, and in the meantime that they may live luxuriously. They dwell there in caves, wherein all things are fetid, and the places where they dwell smell like the smell where mice are. They even appear, when seen by angels, like great mice. I have heard certain ones, who had been in their caves, saying that the smell was that of mice, and that their places were fetid and filthy, but that they knew how, by fantasies, to render themselves beautiful, and also to decorate these places with various articles, but this only for some moments, for when the fantasies cease, the appearances cease, and then all things are foul. It is said even that they delight in those foul and filthy things, the more so the more interiorly they are in them. That they are thus delighted is from correspondences with such a life. They were often seen by me, sometimes when by fantasies they had assumed beauty, appearing then magnificent in dress and charming in countenance, but as soon as fantastic thought was removed from them, which is done by a good spirit and by an angel, they appear deformed altogether like devils, some black, some horribly flamy, some like corpses, and also they were often seen by me like great mice with long tails. Their concupiscences appeared thus. What is wonderful, there are some spirits of both sexes who, in the appearance of their passions, appear like cats, and those mice fear them just as mice fear cats on earth. They appear like cats because they cared nothing for religious things, except that they heard them, but retained nothing of them. I saw that in those caves are noble wives, yea, of such men as were of the first nobility. But all there are compelled to labor, but no one of them can go out, nor is it permitted to let them out, because they are cunning beyond the rest of spirits, and enter the affections of men secretly, and draw away their minds. In this they are more skilful than the rest, and so they are shut up, that at last they do not open a finger to let them out. They, however, who dwell below in the western region, are similar, and in greater number. They are unmarried females, who have given themselves to whoredom, and pass their whole life in whoredom. There is a similar smell of mice there, not so strong, and they also appear like mice, but smaller. The caverns where they are appear winding and subterranean, one cavern below another, and a great multitude is there. I have seen the larger mice, when a preacher came to them, hold, by fantasy, a book of psalms in their hand, and look towards certain from whom they draw what to answer, and answer as from themselves, this by cunning. And then they feign devotion, when yet they have no devotion at all, so they deceive the preachers. But they do this in the gates. But within the caverns they answer nothing, because they cannot look to those from whom they draw the answers. Various things concerning marriage and adulteries. Heaven is marriage, and adultery is hell. Marriage descends from the marriage of good and truth, and adultery from the marriage of evil and falsity. Therefore there is given priestly adultery, which in external appearance is similar. In heaven they abhor adulteries, and therefore heaven is closed to adulterers, and hell is opened wide, according to the quality and quantity of the adultery. A man, by conjugal love, receives the form of love in the mind, and therefrom in the body, thus the form of heaven. And a man by adulteries receives the form of adultery, thus the form of hell. Conjugal love is the fundamental love of all heavenly loves, and it is the image of heaven, thus of the Lord. Heavenly joy is founded upon conjugal love. Hence the heavenly joys, which the angels have solely from thence, are innumerable, and scarcely one of those innumerable joys is known in the world, because at this day adultery reigns there, even from falsity of doctrine, but that they were known in part to the ancients. Angelic wisdom grows by marriages, and it is in the place of procreation to them, for which reason it is a procreation of wisdom, whence daughters, sons, father and mother in the word signify such things as are of good and truth, thus which are of wisdom. Passages may be adduced from the word. From adulteries all ignorance and stupidity in spiritual things grow, because it is the marriage of falsity and evil. The falsification and adulteration of the truth and good of the word is signified by whoredoms there, may be proved from the word. To love the consort is to do good before the Lord, because this is chastity itself. And the church itself is called virgin and daughter, as the daughter and the virgin of Zion and Jerusalem. Passages may be quoted. Conjugal love has communication with heaven, and the organs of generation have correspondence with the third heaven, especially the womb, concerning which correspondence. Even intercourse from conjugal love communicates. That love arises from the Lord's influx alone through the third heaven. The third heaven is the conjugal of heaven. Thus marriages are held as most holy in heaven, and adulteries profane. What adulteries are, considered. Conjugal love increases in potency and effect to eternity, insomuch that it is love as to all power and effect. Thence is the life of their souls. But with adulteries, love decreases as to power and effect, even so that it becomes impotence and a stock and scarce of any life. No one can be in conjugal love unless he be spiritual by combat against evils and their falsities, and unless he acknowledges the Lord and his divine. The wife and husband are consociated as to mind, as one flesh. It is my bone and my flesh, as Adam said. Conjugal love continually unites, that they be one man. Conjugal love depends on the love of the wife, And such is the love of the husband in reciprocation. And the love of the wife does not depend on the love of the husband. The reason is because, like as the will actuates the understanding, good actuates truth. Hence it is said that the husband ought to cleave to the wife. The contrary is the case with those who are not in conjugal love. The wife wills to think and will as the husband, and the husband as the wife, and because each wills this, each is led by the Lord as one, and the two are one angel. For when the will and the understanding are not one's own, but the other's, and this mutually and reciprocally, it cannot be otherwise than that they be led by the Lord as one. Hereditary evil becomes by adulteries continually more malignant, which is on account of adulteries which are considered allowable. Adulteries are most filthy may appear only from this, that the seed of the man as to its spiritual, and also as to its interior natural, adds itself to the body of the woman, for the man's life is in it. What then can it be when the lives of several men are introduced at the same time, but filthiness and interior putridity? An example that one acquires such a nausea and disgust against his wife as not to be able to look at her, merely when he doubted about God and the Word, was the priest. Conjugal love is such love, such delight, and such wisdom to those that heaven is in it, that so far they are men, is confirmed by angels of heaven by a living voice. Afterwards they looked into hell, and said that there was all filthiness, and that especially adulterers and adulteresses appear like swine and hogs, and those who are like swine and hogs delight in ordure. And they said that one of them delighted in it so much that he wished to eat it. This coincides with the prophet, who was ordered to make for himself a cake with dung. By conjugal love the interiors of the mind are opened, because the influx into it is from the Lord through the third heaven. Thence a man becomes receptive of all celestial loves and likewise of truths. In conjugal love is the inmost of conscience. Conjugal love with the angels. I have spoken concerning conjugal love with the angels, and they said that it is the inmost of all loves, and that it is such that a consort sees his consort in his soul and in his mind, so that his spiritual image is there, and thus that a consort has the consort as if in himself, and this is cohabitation in the spiritual sense. This also was represented by angelic ideas which cannot be expressed, hence their conjunctions are delicious. To one man, one wife. In the Christian world, where interior things of the church are revealed, and where the Lord is worshipped, and it is known that from him is heaven and the church is conjoined with him, as a wife with a husband, and that there is but one church, and that with those who are of that church there will be the conjunction of good and truth, it is not allowed to take several wives, for this would be to pervert the spiritual which is or can be in marriage. Wherefore, if a Christian man should take several wives, it would be as if he had with himself two churches; also, as if truth should take its essence from two goods, from which marriage is not given. For good is the esse of truth, and the esse or essence of one truth from two goods is not given. Whence it is that love truly conjugal can by no means be given in the case of one man with several wives, for thus it would be lasciviousness that would enter. Besides, love cannot be divided, since it is from the affection of one, which is of the will, concordant with the thought of another, which is of the understanding. And this unanimity and cohabitation, which makes the essence of conjugal love, cannot be given in the case of several wives. In a word, with them there is not the Christian church, wherefore when an angel in heaven only thinks of several wives, the celestial and angelic perishes, and joy as well as wisdom with him, and he falls from heaven. There have been seen those from Christians who have confirmed themselves about polygamy. They were several thousands in one society, for those who are alike as to love form a society, and conjugal love is the fundamental of all. And when the last judgment took place, that region appeared as if swallowed up by hell, and afterwards it was said that they knew nothing about their members of generation, just as if they had been without them. They had confirmed themselves in this from the Judaism of the Old Testament, because it was then lawful to take several wives. But it is lawful in Mohammedanism everywhere. It was permitted to the Jews because the Jews were external men, inwardly idolaters, with whom the interiors of the church were not, nor were opened. Wherefore they did not recognize the Lord. What it is with Mohammedans shall be told hereafter. In a word, several consorts and one husband cannot become one flesh, that is, one mind, which consists of will and understanding, the marriage of which, as far as relates to the mind in its existence, presents a marriage, for all things in the universe relate to the marriage of good and truth, thus to marriage, in order that they may be anything and produce anything. And marriage itself, in its very form and its very essence, is presented in man with his compeer, likewise in an angel. A plurality of wives among Mohammedans. I have spoken with Mohammedans about the spiritual marriage, that it is the marriage of good and truth, and that good loves truth, like two consorts, and that they desire to be conjoined, and to produce goods and truths like daughters and sons, and to procreate families, as it were. This they understood well, and also that conjugal love descends from that spiritual origin, and that all the spiritual with man undergoes a change, so that it may scarcely be recognized when it descends into the natural, but is known only by correspondences. From which it appears that those who have several wives conceded to them from their religion cannot have love truly conjugal. And it is said that a plurality of wives was conceded to them, or polygamy was permitted, because those who are in warm countries, more than those who are in cold countries, burn with libidinous heat. Therefore, if polygamy had not been permitted them, many of them would rush into adulteries more than Europeans, and would thus act contrary to their religious persuasion, and to act contrary to that is to profane what is holy. It was shown further that all their love of marriage is lascivious, thus not spiritual, and cannot become spiritual unless they acknowledge the Lord. The lot of those in the other life is such, that first, as in the world, they there take several wives besides concubines, but because in the spiritual world the conjunction is of souls, and they are of different souls, they cannot be together, but separate from each other spontaneously, and are finally conjoined to a woman who is of similar soul. Thus, gradually, they separate from their women, and thus finally are united with one, with whom their soul accords. Moreover, they who persist in polygamy, in the course of time, become so feeble and impotent that they are disgusted with marriage, for lasciviousness brings this with itself. Those of them who are in their heaven have but one wife, and have rejected more, for there is a Mohammedan heaven distinct from the Christian heaven. But they, who at last, as do many, acknowledge the Lord as one with the Father, are separated into heavens, which communicate with the Christian heavens, and with them there is conjugal love. They have heard from the angels conjugal love described as to its delights and pleasantnesses, and that it endures to eternity, with an infinite variety of delights and pleasantnesses. And they wondered, many of them therefore received faith in the Lord, and were sent among the angels of the Christian heavens, and instructed concerning the Lord and in the doctrine of love and faith towards him. The state of consorts after death. Almost everyone who has lived in marriage in the world, after death either meets with his wife, if she died first, or awaits her. When they meet, they mutually explore each other as to what their mutual affection was, and if there had not been mutual affection, they separate spontaneously, for two dissimilar affections and thoughts cannot consociate, for there is a communication of all affections, and thence of thoughts. If there is not a concordance, a great uneasiness begins, then difficult breathing, like a discordant painting, so that they cannot but be separated, and then they are conjoined with others according to similitude. They who have lived in celibacy live also in celibacy for a long time, but if they have desired marriage in the world, they also, at length, enter into marriage. Those who cannot await the other consort, whether male or female, are conjoined in the meanwhile to another similar one, but then there is given them a perception that it is the same consort they had in the world, but this is dissolved, because there were no betrothing and nuptials, when the true consort arrives, for then from cohabitation in the world they know each other well, and they who wish remain with their own, as was said before. The marriages of the angels of heaven are all provided by the Lord, who alone knows the similitude of souls which is to endure to eternity. And then a consort from the first glance recognizes his consort, which is because the similitude of souls conjoins. But in hell there are not marriages, but there are adulteries. In infernal societies, there the men are separated from the women, and when they think that they are to speak with a wife, from a habit acquired in the world, he goes to the women, and a persuasion is given him then that this or that one is his woman, with whom he then consociates himself, but that persuasion is varied, because it makes no difference, since in hell there is no marriage but adultery. Those who live modestly and chastely in outward form, but think lasciviously. Afar off were seen women concerning whom it was said that they had lived in the world as virgins, and had avoided matrimony for the sake of chastity, saying that matrimonies were in themselves unchaste, comparing them to allowed whoredoms. It was said also that many of them were from convents, professing chastity for the sake of heaven or eternal salvation. They appeared from afar as naked, because chastity and innocence is represented in the spiritual world by nakedness, which also signifies a life blameless and free from whoredom. But it was perceived that from afar off, in a secret place, they dealt after death with men, adulterers, taking care sagaciously not to be seen. But when they were manifestly infested, then they escaped with mocking and fled away. Then was felt the ardor of the men who desired them for wives, because they thought them more chaste and innocent than others. It was said that they were more obscene than others, having delighted in heinous lasciviousness. They were such women as had thought lasciviously within themselves. It was said of them that after a space of time they acquire such an aversion for matrimony that nothing can exceed it, and conjugal love perishes, and they become disgusting. And this, after they have been for some time foul prostitutes, having cast aside all shame, because the external being removed, the internal acts, and their internal without the external is then without any bond from shame. Those who have affected external sanctity, and also have been given to devotion, and thus are religious, because they become profane, and have mingled adulteries with the delight of sanctity, whence comes profanation, appear at length like bony skeletons. To command in marriage takes away conjugal love, and concerning the Dutch women. Concerning the love of commanding in marriages, that it takes away all love truly conjugal, since conjugal love is such that the one wills to think and will as the other, and thus mutually and reciprocally, so neither one commands, but the Lord. Thence is the delight of conjugal love. That wives may not command over husbands is taken care of there in societies. There the men dwell on one side, and the women or wives on the other. And when the men desire, they send to them, and summon them, and then they are separated, or live separately. If the wives are indignant, and become angry on account of it, and infest the men because of serving and obeying when they are called, then they are sent forth from the society and wander over various places, and a desire is given to them of going away and deserting the husband. Then, when they wander, Everywhere they encounter an enclosure or obstacle, as it were a marsh, water, or a wall, and so forth. And while this lasts, the desire of going away diminishes, and they do this until they are tired out, and then they return to the society and to the mansion, there where they had been before. Thus the Dutch women are amended. The torment of those who are of hell from the influx of conjugal love. All influx from heaven torments the infernals, wherefore hell is removed from heaven, and is also everywhere shut up, so that influx may not at all be felt. The reason is, that they are in contrary love, and just as infernal love torments the celestials, so celestial love torments the infernals. But the celestial prevails, wherefore hell is removed as far as possible. This is meant in the Evangelist, in Abraham saying that there is a gulf, so that there is no passing over. But the influx of conjugal love from heaven especially torments the infernals. I have seen spirits in hell brought even into the world of spirits, which is the middle. When these perceive the influx of conjugal love, they come into fury so as to act like furies, and also as if they were tormented like serpents and tamarisks, twisting hither and thither, their bodies and intestines like one who is twisted miserably by torment within. They compared their suffering with the greatest sufferings. The reason is, that the love of marriage and the love of adultery are altogether opposite, and conjugal love itself is heaven, and the love of adultery is hell. The love flows into their externals and torments their internals. The infernal marriage. The infernal marriage is when one wills to command, and the other wills not to serve. Thence is deadly hatred interiorly. This was represented by the most direful things, which on account of direfulness cannot be described. They breathe nothing else than slaughter, and also torment of each other, wherefore they are separated, and live separated in hell and adultery, concerning which above, concerning Charles the 12th. Those who plot against conjugal love. I have heard from such many plots and secret arts of alluring chaste wives to adultery. I have seen more arts than in the world, gaining the favour of them as well as of the husband, by flattering both, and especially the husband, putting on the appearance of interior friendship, exploring the desires and cupidities of the wife, whether she wishes openly or unwillingly, besides 1,000 other things. But such are sent not long after death into a hell situated under the hinder part of the province of the knee, and are there very deep and altogether shut up, that there may be no aperture whatever to look out of that prison, for they are dangerous against conjugal love, which is most holy, and there they are compelled to labor, and have a harlot in place of a wife. But they who have the rage of violation, and perceive a delight in violation, are let down into a cadaverous hell, whence exhales a smell as from corpses, which excites vomiting. It excites it with me. They plot by means of love towards infants. They were seen to rise from the earth over in front of Gehenna, almost invisible, continually removing obstacles so that they might come into chaste homes. These they love, but not unchaste ones. They can put on various countenances, and also by arts send themselves forth through thoughts as if they were elsewhere, and thus enter. They put on also a countenance of innocence and preach chastity. They extol it with praises. They enter into friendships in various ways, even so that they are praised and loved. And if the wife is conscious and desirous, she is praised. They spoke with me, saying that they wondered that there could be any so conscientious as to say that this is against conscience, charity, and religion. They were in such persuasion that they saw no evil in it, much less anything filthy. They also spoke sanely concerning marriage. Their hell also is under the buttocks, in front, in the foul excrementitious smell there. And because they are crafty, feigning chastity, innocence, and friendships, and many other things, therefore when they come into their internals, which are adulteries, they are vastated until they appear deformed devils. As to internals, little of the human remains. They become stupid because they are against the holiness of heaven. They mock and laugh at those who call marriages holy, and adulteries profane or even unlawful. Love truly conjugal is naked. The angels of the third heaven are those who are in celestial marriage more than others, for they are in love to the Lord, and thence in the marriage of good and truth, whence also they are in conjugal love more than other angels, and in innocence and chastity. These walk with a cincture around the loins when abroad, and without the cincture when at home, and yet in their nakedness they look upon the consort as a consort, nor is there anything lascivious therein. They say that to look at a consort clothed detracts from the idea of marriage, and what is wonderful, nakedness does not excite or stimulate. It is, however, as an internal bond of conjugal love. In bed they lie conjoined as they were created, and sleep so. They say that they cannot do otherwise, because conjugal love itself, which is perpetual, conjoins. Thus also the life of one is communicated with the life of the other, and the life of the husband becomes appropriated to the wife, that it may be as we read of Adam when he saw Eve his wife, "Behold, my bone and my flesh," and also that "they were naked and not ashamed." That is not lascivious. But as soon as Adam, through his wife, receded from love to the Lord, which is meant by the tree of life in paradise, which happened because they acted from themselves and their own proprium, namely from the science and delight of the natural man, then the marriage of good and truth perished. Then nakedness became lascivious, and the chastity of marriage failing. They were ashamed of nakedness, and were clothed with fig leaves, and afterwards with woolen garments. Thence by nakedness in the word is meant lasciviousness, like that of adultery. In the other heavens, under the third, all appear clothed, and also blush at nakedness before the eyes of others, because it excites lasciviousness. To them marriage is not such a delight as in the third heaven. In the lowest heaven there is also something of cold, but not indeed as in the world. I was carried by the Lord through changes of state towards the left to a certain mountain where all were naked, wives and husbands. At a distance I spoke with them, and they said that all are naked there. And nevertheless no lascivious appetite or desire was caused to any one from seeing nakedness, and that each consort loved the consort tenderly. Also, that they could not be united with them clothed. They told the reason, that all were chaste in mind, because they were such in the world. When any newcomer of such a nature arrives from the world, they explore him, which is done by his putting off his garments and stripping himself. Then they perceive immediately whether he has a genuine conjugal. If not, he is driven away with punishment. They drive him with blows until he appears no more, and this to the depth. There was a certain one who thought he was in like conjugal love, because in the world he had lived chastely with his wife, nor had he ever anything in common with harlots. He at first could look upon naked women without any emotion of mind, but when his sight had been fixed for some time, he was deprived of his senses at the sight, and finally at the touch of nakedness, and stood without speech, as if half dead, wherefore he was driven away. The reason was that he was not in love to the Lord, nor in the marriage of good and truth. They said that few could approach, because the sphere of conjugal love is such that others cannot bear it. They said that they live in houses with men-servants and maidservants, who all are in marriage. The angels of the third heaven dwell upon mountains, not rocky, but of earth, upon which are paradises and gardens with trees. The mountains appear elevated to a point. In the highest part of the mountains are the best and most chaste. Below, according to degree in marriage, are the spiritual and the spiritual natural. Also their distinctions are according to the quarters: the eastern quarter where they are in love, the south where they are in wisdom. Conjugal love descends from the marriage of good and truth. From much experience it has become known to me that no one has conjugal love unless he be in the love of truth from good, and in the love of good through truth, that is, in celestial marriage, and that no one can be in any mutual love of good and truth, except they who shun adultery, and are averse to it as infernal, and this although they may have lived in marriage in the world, and loved their consort on account of cohabitation, and the delight of earthly life, and for the sake of children. For celestial things ought to flow into conjugal love, and man after death comes into his celestial or spiritual things, and then becomes such altogether as he was with regard to them, nor can it be otherwise. Conjugal love causes a man to be love. Man was created to be love, and thence wisdom, since the Lord is divine love and divine wisdom, and it is from creation that a man is the image and likeness of the Lord. And this cannot be without genuine conjugal love. From that, everything of man can be turned into love, for in marriage it is lawful for each to love even the body from the heart, and thus to dispose the soul and all things thence to the form of love, which otherwise is not possible. The inmost and outermost there make one, and induce that form, and that form is a form of heaven. The exploration of spirits by conjugal love. Spirits who have recently come into the spiritual world are explored, first of all, as to whether they are against conjugal love. They are led to places where the sphere of conjugal love passes by, or to chaste consorts. If then they change countenance, and indignation appears, and more, if they then think lasciviously, and still more if they speak so, it is a sign that they are of infernal mind. But if they then rejoice, and are exhilarated, that they are of a celestial mind, it is a test whether they are of heaven or of hell. Those who are against conjugal love are of hell, they who are with it are of heaven. Adulteries from faith separated from charity. I was with those who had confirmed themselves in faith separated from charity, not only in doctrine but also in life, believing that they were to be saved by faith alone, even in the hour of death, howsoever they had lived, and thus that all evils were either not regarded by God the Father, or excused on account of the infirmity of man, or remitted, and that when remitted they were also washed away. They, looking to the merit of the Lord from the fulfillment of the law, and that by the passion of the cross he had taken away the sins of the world, and the condemnation of the law, and various things which their doctrine preaches. I perceived when they were in the company of those, or among those, with whom they communicated, when we were speaking of that faith, there existed the most obscene representations of heinous adultery, such as that of a son with a mother. The sphere itself was such that it could be perceived by spiritual communication. They act into the occiput, and thus enter into the thought. From their presence also comes pain in the left knee. The reason that such adultery is perceived from them is that they think of God, of the Lord, of salvation, and of eternal life, and they confirm those things from the Word, which thence are spiritual, because there can be nothing of faith unless it be conjoined with some love, and with them this is conjoined with love merely natural, and with its cupidities. And the conjunction of faith with evil love makes that adultery. They think concerning faith from an evil life, and when they are in the delights of terrestrial and corporeal love, thence is the conjunction of faith or truth with evil. The spiritual, which is of faith, is as a mother, and the son is evil. I have seen cohorts of them cast out into the hells, and many of them into deserts, where everything of faith is taken away from them, and there they live like wild beasts, and when everything of faith is taken away from them, they are almost deprived of rationality. Why, in the Christian world, more than elsewhere, adulteries are not abhorred? The Gentiles wonder why in the Christian world adulteries and whoredoms are accounted allowable by many and even by most, when yet their religion from the word of both testaments condemns them to hell. But the reason was told that few live according to their religion, but have embraced the doctrine that faith saves, that is, that thinking and not living saves. And because thus truth is conjoined with evil, thence, from the influx from hell, adulteries are loved and received, and also they excuse them. For the influx of hell prevails with them over the influx of heaven. The sphere of adultery also closes heaven, and and when heaven is closed, hell is opened. Hence its origin comes from the falsity of religions. It is otherwise with those who place religion and life and doctrine at the same time. The sphere of adultery. When they speak against the truths and goods of faith and charity, a sphere of whoredom and adultery is produced, and then adulterers rush thither as crows to a carcass, and delight in that stench. Thence the sphere is filled with such and other obscene things that a good person would be horrified. Adulterers and their hells. Their hells are under the buttocks, which are excrementitious. They desire to emerge thence and come into the world, but in vain, because they had loved terrestrial and corporeal things. Thence appeared, as it were, a vomiting and heaving. In such an effort are they. Adulteries in the Christian world. There are many there of family and of illustrious condition, and thus not of the common people, because they adopted the principle that marriages are for the sake of offspring, and it matters not whether they are violated by others. And they laugh at the sanctity of marriage, calling them silly. Such were brought up out of the hells in great numbers, and being let into the state in which they were in the world, they inquired where there were beautiful wives, and when it was pointed out, they rushed, like insane persons and like furies, wishing to enter into houses. But in their blind heat they were carried away to a place where the earth opened, and the crowd was cast into a hell which was behind the back. The influx of adultery from genii. I have passed through the hell where were crafty and interiorly vastated adulterers, and then it was permitted them to flow into the affections of my will, and with such subtlety and art and skill to invert, pervert, and extinguish my thoughts in favor of chastity, and to induce the enjoyment and lust of adultery. They turned themselves to every particle of thought from affection, persuading silently. This was done with me, that I might know that man of himself could in no way resist the delight of adultery except from the Lord. For they act into the hereditary life within the thought, insomuch that man can in no wise observe it. But there was then given me by the Lord an interior perception of their effort. Priestly whoredom. This is especially committed by those who have confirmed the falsities of doctrine from the Word, and thus have falsified and adulterated it. The reason is that the Word is marriage, corresponds to marriage, and in itself is spiritual, and the delight of natural love falsifies it, especially in preachers. They who read the Word without doctrine cannot but fall into many fallacies from the sense of the letter, which is according to appearances with man, and at the same time they have acquired many falsities, and confirm themselves in them, and at the same time are thence in the pride of their own intelligence. These produce adulteries as of a father with a daughter-in-law. They who confirm themselves that all evils are remitted by the Holy Supper, without other repentance, and without conversion of life, and who do evils, are in the belief that afterwards evil or sins are taken away by the Holy Supper. Their adultery is with the maternal aunt. Because the Jewish nation had by traditions falsified all things of the Word, it is called by the Lord an adulterous nation. When charity is acknowledged and not faith, and yet the life of charity is not lived, and they still read the Word, it is the adultery of sister and brother. There are those who frequent the temple, and then pray devoutly and care nothing for evils of life, as thefts, secret robberies, adulteries, hatreds, revenges, cursings of enemies, and those who do not favor them. This is with a sister. The love of self, especially of ruling and yet thinking from the Word, is such as that of Sodom, wherefore they demanded the angels from the house of Lot. Those who speak much concerning God, and yet care nothing about deceiving men and depriving them of their goods, commit adultery with maidservants, whom they change frequently. The hells of adulterers. There are many hells of these, according to the kinds of adultery, which are various. I have seen harlots who hid themselves in the western region, and obstructed the roads, that none might approach except they were willing. I was taken thither, and they were harlots, who were all cast into a marshy pool, remote at the back, in the west. They were such as were openly harlots. Those who had exercised whoredom secretly, without the knowledge of others, and were such to the end of life, were cast into a dark cavern in the west. Some harlots of noble family who excelled in genius, and also could reason about God, are cast into a marshy pool in the southern region. Other harlots who are able to steal men by arts not known in the world, compelling them into their proprium by praises, and by the immersion of their mind into themselves, and because then being without protection from the Lord, they were delivered over to them, such women are cast into a place burning as it were with sulphur and fire, according to appearance. They dwell in the southwestern quarter, and similar men are cast into a dark abyss, sloping under the pool of the women. Women fascinate men, and men women, by diabolical arts, which are many, and which it is not allowed to recount. Those who are adulterers spiritually are distinguished from adulterers naturally. The latter, if they perceive delight in adulteries, and no delight in marriages, are excluded from heaven, and all are sent into hells. But the adulterers spiritually, although they perceive nothing unlawful in adulteries, are yet explored and even amended, and others are allotted places according to life. There are some in excrementitious hells who are addicted to variety, and by it have extinguished the conjugal, and at the same time are voluptuous. They are in the province of the intestines, under the former, where are everywhere sinks and foul odor, and everywhere there are caverns from which such an odor exhales. Those who had a communion of wives are bound as it were into a bundle, and the bundle is tied together by a stretched out serpent, and they are cast into a whirlpool, which is beyond the spiritual world of this earth. They who seduced by the appearance of piety, and thence persuade themselves that adulteries are not contrary to the Christian life, are sent into Gehenna, whence is perceived a stench as of burnt bones and hair, and are there in the fantasy that they are bitten by serpents, when in heat they are on fire, and when they approach heaven, they become frozen like ice, and are miserably tortured. Monks and Jesuits, who have acted thus under the pretext of piety, and on account of pity towards them, with the promise that they would remit sins, are also committed to Gehenna.